Hello, denizens of the deep. Cool. That was a bit deep. I'm John Atack, and this is Sancho Panza, as she refers to herself. This is the inimitable Spike Robinson, and it's very nearly be 8 years. I think it's eight years, is it? Since we started working together.
A long, strange trip it's been, John.
Yeah, you're not kidding. But yeah, we've done a lot of work together. We got nearly 400 videos on
Very nearly. It's SIM 390.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But there we are. It's been a glorious collaboration.
It really has. It's been an honor, a pleasure, and a long, strange trip.
A long, strange trip. Serendipitous in its way, though.
And the thing is that we're going to be talking about my own cult story today. And if I hadn't gone through all of this, I wouldn't have then started working with you. So I will say that this has turned into, it was a life-changing experience, but the stuff that happened afterwards, the most important to me.
Yeah, it's digesting and integrating our experience that, you know, gives us what semblance of wisdom we have, what small understanding we have of the world. And it's the same for me, that the experience of Scientology for me was relatively bland and not too bad, but the experience of being harassed by Scientology for 16 years was not something I'd recommend. And nonetheless, probably the most difficult thing was actually the interventions that I did with hardcore Scientologists in the early 90s. And because if they find you, they harass you, they're quite unpleasant about it. But that was a really awful experience, particularly the first couple. And as I was finding out what to do, but it was life transforming. And you asked me a few years ago what I meant by the Scientology expression negative gain. And this is negative gain. This is where something traumatic and bad happens to you, but you profit from it. And as long as we can integrate the experience, and knowing that survivors of the concentration camps actually having experienced things that are beyond anything I could imagine, anything that has ever happened to me or is ever likely to happen to me. But many of them, 25 years, 30 years later, actually had integrated. Of course, among the great ones is Viktor Frankl. And Bruno Bettelheim contributed quite a lot, but there's a little bit of a shadow over his reputation, since certain allegations were made about his sexual behavior. But nonetheless, he wrote some remarkable things and did a great deal of good, it is said, for many disturbed young people. So they were able to transmute it's not like alchemy where you're taking lead and turning it into gold. They took shit and turned it into gold. Incredible people. What we're going to do today is explore your cultic experience, which most people probably don't know about, how it was that you came to this work.
Because I don't talk about it very much. It was over 20 years ago. And I will put, just as a preface, I'm fine now.
Comparatively.
And to me, a lot of this is so distant that I like to compare it to a movie I taped off a TV once and then put the tape in the... I'm dating myself by using a VHS, friends. But it's that level of interbulating for me. It was a horrific experience. And so a lot of the stuff is going to be, before we started recording, I was saying to you, John, that a lot of people are going to think, how could she have been so stupid to have believed so fervently in this crazy stuff? And yes, it was like a bout of insanity, really, honestly.
And I
Yeah.
think all belief systems um, look weird to the outsider. I remember a Baptist minister um, saying to me many years ago, did people really believe that this galactic prince Xenu rounded people up 75 million years ago and dropped them into volcanoes and blew them up with hydrogen bombs? And I couldn't help myself. I looked at him and said, there are a lot of people who believe there was a bloke who could not only walk on water, but turn it into wine.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized who I was talking to. Oh, sorry. I'd never
Yeah.
seen anybody actually turn red before. It was quite, it was kind of beetroot red. It was quite, and to an outsider, that belief, or, you know, Muhammad's right up to heaven. There are a lot of things that are accepted. You know, Krishna, little blue boy playing the flute, that are religious doctrine to people and sacred, and it's blasphemous to treat them as lightly as I'm doing now. So I apologize for that. Then, of course, you have the atheist community who know, you know, they're absolutely right about everything and understand everything, and have their own high horses to get up onto. So we're all human,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh,
to
yeah,
err
there
is
was
human.
somebody who was saying in the comments that he's an atheist. You can tell he's an atheist because he's talking like an atheist. Somebody said, but he says he's an agnostic. No, he's an atheist.
Oh, that stuff, yeah, that went round and round, didn't it? The guy trying to persuade me that I was not allowed to call myself an agnostic. Someone who hasn't drawn a conclusion, hasn't come to a certainty about things. And yeah, okay, I said this before, but when people get militant about their atheism, the kind of Richard Dawkins mob, um, they don't understand that they've adopted a faith system.
Mm-hmm. Well, when they get militant about anything, a political opinion, even a sports team.
Yeah, it's the fervor, it's the fanaticism, it's the I'm right and you're wrong, and the
Mm-hmm.
unwillingness to have discourse. But it was Thomas Huxley, wasn't it, who invented the word agnostic, who was called Darwin's bulldog.
Yeah.
He was the guy that you know, because Darwin was a very retiring sort of human being and not very well most of the time. So Huxley went into public. Of course, his grandchildren were to become famous, Aldous Huxley and Julian Huxley, the biologist,
Yeah.
who first gave us the word clone in the popular language.
There you
There you
be.
go, 1932 in Brave New World.
That date.
It's the first time I believe it was used in a work of fiction. Julian Huxley, who was one of the most eminent biologists of his time, and gave the so what was his name, David Leake or something. He gave the first objective proof of evolution in Darwin's finches in the Galapagos, and that was under the direction of Julian Huxley. This is why people tune in to watch us.
I know, and I was just thinking, my God, you know, this
What
is
is
what I love is we always get into these long. I mean, when we're on the phone,
tortuous.
Our morning meetings go into an hour on the phone. Thank God I've got a special plan to call to England. Otherwise, it would be prohibitively expensive because you're always talking about something different. And I think that segue here, that's how I got in, was because I have always been interested in the little tiny bits and pieces, the little bits of glitter of life where, hey, have you ever seen this and that and this and that? And I've always, well, to start properly, when I was a very small child, I was a child who always felt the presence of something else in my life, something bigger, somebody huge.
And you grew up in
In
your
an
mum was
atheist home.
atheist, yeah.
Yeah. The family story is that I once turned to my mother and said, look, Mom, somebody you don't believe in is making it snow. And my mom was and until she passed this last July, hardcore atheist. If it wasn't, doesn't exist. My father, it's hard to pin down what he believes because he just likes to tell jokes and relax. It's very hard to pin him down on anything hardcore belief. He just doesn't like to talk about anything like that.
Yeah. I can understand that point of view. I've got into a lot of trouble talking about it.
Well, the funny thing is that he's an engineer. So
Mm,
he was one of the people that we went down to visit NASA in Florida, and he was walking around going, I've got a patent on that piece, that piece, that piece, that piece. He helped design the F-16 fighter jet. He was an active part of the aerospace industry
mm,
and had a lot of very high technical knowledge, but when it came to the arts, philosophy, not so much.
mm,
Whereas I was all about arts and philosophy. I'd wander in the woods outside my home. I live in Vermont. Any stand of woods is less than 5 minutes away from any house in Burlington. And I feel the presence of fairies, and any stick I picked up was a magic wand, and any rock I picked up on the beach was a magic rock. Magic
What
was
an
all
annoying
around.
child you must have been
I was
for an atheist mother.
oh, I'm sure I was, also because I used to bring spiders into the house too and
Mm,
make them pets, and pick up little garter snakes and try to make them pets and things like that. Drove my mother crazy.
mm,
I also felt a very deep spiritual connection to water. So, and having been kept away from any kind of religious instruction, I kind of made my own religious instruction.
mm,
And that was that spirits were real, and the Greek and Roman gods, because I picked up a kid's copy of Ovid's Metamorphoses
mm,
very early on, really got into the stories and decided that this was reality.
mm,
Poseidon was with us, Apollo was with us. All of the spirits were in nature. I could feel them. I had
mm,
noesis, the feeling of certainty about nature spirits. And I felt that I'm going to have to come out and say it, because I already believed in crazy stuff before I even got into my cult. I believed I was a bride of water.
mm.
I was
Well,
that attached to lakes, and we have a beautiful lake
mm,
here in Vermont, Lake Champlain. It is gorgeous,
mm,
and I always have felt a very deep spiritual attachment to it. I don't do it anymore, but every spring I would go and touch the freshly thawed water and go, I'm here.
well, I think you should do that. So that sounds like a good idea. Mm. So, I'm told that there are people who tell their children there's a bloke who comes down the chimney and leaves presents for them. That
I'll
there's
put a
a
link to our video on that.
and that there's apparently at Easter there's a bunny that comes round and lays chocolate eggs or something. I've
And
never
my
really quite
parents
understood that one.
didn't want me to be raised with that either. Though I
Mm.
will say they did keep the Easter bunny and the tooth. I found out about the Easter
Tooth
bunny and the
fairy.
tooth fairy the same night, because I lost a tooth, and I was so excited about Easter being tomorrow that I didn't fall asleep right away. When my mom came, tucked me in, I heard the distinct chink of change underneath the
Mm.
pillow. And then I was
And
like,
interesting that an atheist would want to perpetuate this thing, the sense that the
yeah.
childhood realm is a realm where the imagination and fairy stories are permitted, but then we have to grow up. And
Well, the thing was, so I stayed awake and saw my parents sneaking down the hallway with the Easter goodies. But when I asked about Santa Claus, they immediately, as I said in our other video on Santa, told me immediately about Nicholas of Smyrna and all of the historical stuff, and told me, no, he isn't real, but
we got you
and
some presents
but I
anyway.
I grew up with fairies. I mean, I had the Narnia books. I had all of the Lang fairy books, the blue fairy book, the green fairy book, the brown fairy book, the violet fairy book. Very good reading, by the way. They're a whole compilation of all of Europe's fairy tales, and some of Arabia, some of Asia.
Mm,
Really, I can recommend them strongly for any student of folklore. So I was already a very magical thinking creature,
mm,
but didn't have any religious, so I just sort of created my own one. So that's the sort of mindset that I want to have in place to show how easily it was. Also, I was raised to believed that everybody else around me was right and I was wrong.
Not very helpful, is it, really?
Not very helpful, but I was raised to defer to others.
Oh.
That, you always can be wrong, remember, and remember that this person here, they've got it right because they're older than you.
Mm.
Or even they're just more educated than you. And it came to a point where basically I would judge people's ages by how much I thought they had their shit together. So I said to a friend once, "What? Wait a minute, you're 3 months younger than me? I thought you were at least 5 years older than me because you've got your life together." Of course, now that I'm 55, I realize that is total bunk.
Now, nobody's got their life together. Let's face it. Oh, dear.
But I was raised to defer to others and believe that anybody who's sort of in charge or has this oomph of being in charge must be right. And I'm not sure my
Authority.
parents actually said it, but they wanted me to follow along and be a good citizen. I don't think they meant any wrong in it. They just wanted
Yeah.
me to be a good citizen by deferring to others, and being polite was very, very important. So even if somebody was being rude to you, you had to still be nice. You go, "Well, yeah, you might be right. Okay."
Fair enough.
So now I stayed at home and lived at home during my undergrad university degree, and then went away for the first time ever.
What was your undergraduate degree? What did you major in?
Oh, music theory, the actual mathematics of music. So because I was very lucky in my childhood, my piano teacher taught me basic music theory without actually telling me it was music theory. I
Aha.
thought she was telling me stories about the C family and the G family and the F family and how they all related to each other. And I was learning that, F and F sharp don't like each other. C and F sharp really don't like each other very much. But I was
Unless
learning,
we're playing free jazz, of course, in
or
which case
when
they
I was
love each other.
they exactly. When I was a young child, had a little Bakelite organ that had all the little chord buttons, and I remember pressing them. And so music was also a very big thing. We would sing for hours with my family. Everybody played guitar, everybody played a bit of piano. My father's one of these people that can sit and pick up any instrument and play it immediately. My sister can play any brass or woodwind instrument. I can play any string instrument. It's just endemic to our family. So music theory, yeah. So that I learned music theory very easily. So it was obvious to me I had to learn music theory. The idea was I was going to become a professor and teach music theory in a university, and that's what I was going to do. That was the plan. So, however, the University of Vermont does not offer a master's degree or even a doctoral degree program in music, so I had to go away. And I found a place that would do a master's degree, but not a doctorate, Bowling Green State University in Bowling Green, Ohio. Not Bowling Green, Kentucky, Bowling Green, Ohio.
For anybody that was looking at the wrong place on the map at that moment, Ohio, not Kentucky.
We had a guy who came to do a concert and ended up at the wrong damn airport.
That could be difficult, couldn't it?
Because usually when you say Bowling Green in this country, people immediately fill in Kentucky. Because Bowling Green, Kentucky is a large city. Bowling Green, Ohio is a train whistle stop with a teaching university. And they had a very good composition and theory program. So I went and enrolled in there. But it was the first time I was away from home. And I found it difficult to keep in touch with my family. And I got engaged to a guy in my second year. And long story short, the more emotionally involved I got with him, the less emotionally involved he got with me. Millions of women and men have had that story where, you're really into him and he's not that into you all of a sudden.
Yeah,
So
the 80-20 rule.
yeah. So we broke up, and I was 700 miles away from home. I had graduated and not really gotten into any doctoral program. I decided I was going to take a year off and just figure out what I was going to do, where I was going to go.
Mm.
And I was at loose ends. My parents really didn't approve of me taking a year off between master's and doctorate, but I thought, I've been through 16 years of education all the way. I think I can take a year off and work.
Mm.
But that was not appropriate, apparently. That was not part of the plan.
Mm.
So there was a little bit of tension there at home,
Yep.
which led to a little bit of silence. And then the breakup with the boyfriend. And of course, you got into Scientology because you broke up with your girlfriend. Steve broke up with somebody. I've heard this zillions of times now, that a breakup, and sometime when you're feeling at odds with yourself and you're away from your support systems, all of my friends had graduated and gone back home.
Mm. Yeah, I
And
mean,
I was left alone.
any situation of transition. I mean,
Mm,
people mistakenly believe that entry into an authoritarian group always comes when something bad's happened to you,
mhm.
and that's really not the case. But it is often the
It
case.
is often the case. Yeah, it's not always the case, but for me and for a lot of other people, it was. It was also a time where I was working at a nursing home, and it was outside the sphere of the university, where I'd walk in, I hear in the break room, "Well, I don't trust people with book learning," and they stare right at me because I had book learning.
Mm.
And they were also the type of Baptist women who, we were taking a Red Cross course, and this one woman refused to mark down the little box where it says, "I take responsibility for my actions," because, I'm sorry, but I have given all my responsibility over to Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior.
Get him to sign the form.
I know. So there was a lot of very heavy, and I'd never been exposed to that before, and it just seemed so anti-woman and so anti-imagination. And I've since met Christians that aren't like that,
Mm.
but it only
Including our
pushed me
friend
further
Christian.
away from them. It pushed me, so I was in this little bubble by myself.
Mm.
And I started hanging out in the local coffee shop. And I would play solitaire with my tarot deck. It's something I've always done. It's stupid. I don't know why, but and it was oh, are those tarot, or that tarot? Is that whatever? And maybe I'd try to give them a reading or whatever, and just for fun. But so so that is basically where it started. After all this prelude,
Yeah, yeah.
me in the local coffee shop in a town where I know a few people, but not very well. I don't have any support systems in place, and
Were we still in Bowling Green,
we're
Ohio, or
still
have we
in Bowling
moved to
Green,
Bowling Green,
Ohio.
Kentucky by now?
Bowling Green, Ohio, and there was this lovely little coffee shop called Grounds for Thought. I don't know if it's there anymore.
Mm. Let's have a
Uh,
shout out for Grounds for Thought, if
Shout
it's
out for
there anymore.
Grounds for Thought, and Kelly, the owner, who was a guy named Kelly, by the way.
Mm.
Interesting. Fun
Can
guy.
happen. Yeah,
Every night, 11 o'clock, he'd shut down the shop, and anybody who was still in the shop got free donuts because he had to have to throw them away. So
absolutely.
give them to
Yeah,
the regulars instead.
good plan.
So I became a regular at this coffee shop, and I was playing tarot. Now, during this year, the Ku Klux Klan was coming to Toledo, which is 20 miles north of Bowling Green.
Mm.
And I heard this guy at the next table saying, "Well, I'm just going to send Kali after them." Now, I
Ali.
was aware of who Kali was because I'd done my,
This is not Kelly who owns the shop for
no, not
anybody.
Kelly, but
This is
Kali,
Kali, the Indian goddess.
of death and destruction and
Black
motherhood and birth and all sorts of,
Black goddess, she is known.
yes. And he was going to have them burn. Now, what happened the next week there was an unprecedented heat wave in Toledo the day of the Ku Klux Klan, and actually people were, and good on good, they were very uncomfortable in their robes. I don't approve of people actually being hurt, but if
We
somebody,
did try and sell them polyester, but they will use wool. What can you say?
if you're going to wear a silly robe and be part of a hate group, you deserve. No. But so,
Deserve to
oh my
wake
God.
up.
And then the very next time I saw him, he was talking. And this guy, he didn't just talk, he declaimed. His name was Jeff. I found out later he was a theater major, which explains almost everything.
Mhm.
He
Makes a great deal of sense.
he looked like he looked like Steve Buscemi, only not as handsome.
Oh dear.
Yeah. And he wore all this silver jewelry and silver necklaces, silver rings on all his hands, and he declaimed about how things. It was like, and to me, who had been cut off from anybody even remotely interesting, he was fascinating. He
You what,
fascinated
about
me.
22, 23 years old or something?
I was 25, I want to
25.
say,
Yeah. Okay.
by that time. I had gone through 2 years of grad school. So yeah,
Good.
3 years of grad, no, 3 years of grad school, and a year out. And I'd also been slightly older than everybody in my schooling. So where everybody else was 18, I was 19
Okay.
at graduation of high school, and then into college. And
Yeah. So here we are, 25 years old and
25.
innocent abroad in a
Yeah,
coffee
and
shop run by a
really
guy called
lonely.
Kelly, hearing about a goddess called Kali.
And this guy, Jeff, came up to my table, says, "Is that a tarot deck?" Yes. He says, do you really know about it? And I was like, well, do you know the true history of it? And sat down and started telling me what I now know is total fucking dreck about it. But at the time, I was very willing to hear how
Are we going to edit out the fucking dreck there?
Maybe.
Okay.
I found that it doesn't really matter.
People these days
As long as you don't say it in the first 30 seconds.
Okay, I won't.
Yeah.
Good. Okay.
Okay, so he told me what was basically a bunch of lies about it, that he'd come from Lemuria and Atlantis and had gone through and had been the basis for all of our mythology and all of this. And we sat and we talked, and he was just fascinating, and he knew how to carry you. Even if he was saying total stupid whatever, and you'd walk away and go, that didn't make any sense. While you were there in his presence, there was this strong hook of, he was telling a story and the story just lived through his telling.
Yeah.
A lot like what I've heard people say being in the presence of Hubbard was like. And he was very into Crowley, and then he pulled a book and this is going to be the famous Blue Notebook. And this is going to be this. And there was also, not only was I fascinated with him, he seemed to be fascinated with me. He asked a lot of questions about me. He then said, "You're the lost sister I've been looking for." And I didn't run. I still don't know why I did not run. I should have run.
Yeah, well.
Insert in the comments everybody who says I should have run at that point. Yes, I know I should have run.
But you wouldn't have that collection of penguins behind you, probably, if you'd run. So
Well, why didn't I run though? Your considered opinion, John.
Well, stranger in a strange land, you quite simply found that this man fascinating. And although, the alarm bells, the red flags, whatever we want to call it, we tend to, you've just told us that you'd been brought up to believe in people, to believe that they knew more than you did. And so you've been brought up to be deferential. And so along comes this flamboyant actor type.
He was so
And
certain.
yeah,
He
exactly.
exuded a sense of everything he said was not just truth, but truth
Mm.
with
Yeah,
capital T.
the confidence that people talk about with Hitler. And when you learn about his discussions early on in the war with his generals, where they're saying, that's absolutely impossible. And he was saying, scientists say the bumblebee can't fly, can't develop enough thrust to lift
He
itself.
gave me that line too. He gave me
See?
the line of how it was, then he gave me the core center of what would explain a lot of bizarre theology afterwards, was that all of our great writers, artists, poets, they had former lifetimes in certain universes, parallel universes, that then they would bring back the stories from,
Mm,
and they would remember them. So C.S. Lewis didn't write Narnia. He lived in Narnia for maybe a couple of lifetimes and then told the stories. Tolkien didn't just write Middle
mm,
Earth, he remembered it.
mm,
The guys who wrote Star Trek were living, and who's to say with time the way it is that your last life wasn't 17,000 years in the future?
mm. I think mine was. Yeah. I
I
mean,
was convinced.
let's
He
just
had me
put in
convinced
a,
by the end of the day that I had been a Starship pilot.
yeah, let's put in for the children that with Tolkien at least we know the source of the Lord of the Rings. He was the world's leading expert on the Mercian language of the Midlands in England, and had become absolutely obsessed with Icelandic ideas and
Mm.
the two Eddas, and he sought actually to construct a language because he was a great linguist, Don at Oxford University,
Mm.
as of course was C.S. Lewis. And so he set about constructing a language because he had dreadful insomnia. And when he was awake at night, he could manage to do this. And the Lord of the Rings, the Hobbit first, and then the Lord of the Rings, and eventually the Silmarillion came out of this exploration in his mind. But he may also have lived in Middle Earth 25,000 years into the future.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the whole thing. And it wasn't just books. It was, although the very popular one was the Zelazny series, which I have never read
Mm.
and never will read, because he assigned me immediately a character in it.
Ah.
I was this character in this series of books.
Mm. Which character were you?
I forget her name. I changed it immediately to something, Lara Wanda, I think. And I was the song maker, and I was the gentle sister, and I was the one who was, because he immediately said that this Aeon was all about the battle between good and evil, and he was there to bring balance between what we felt was good and evil.
Mm.
And he would be walking with an angel on one side and a demon on the other.
Mm.
Mark that. The
Mm.
demon on the other side. And I was the angel who was going to walk on the one side and represent the forces of good that he was balancing and reconciling with the forces of evil. And I was a diplomat for the good side. And then I wasn't just a diplomat, I was related to Jesus somehow. And then I wasn't just related to Jesus somehow, I was Jesus's kid sister. And that Yahweh and Sophia had only two children together, and it was me and Jesus. I mean, there was a whole, so, and that's over a course of a year that I
Mm.
went from just being a diplomat angel to Jesus's kid sister.
Wow. There's a promotion.
I mean, it sounds crazy now, but it was a slow progression of I have just discovered. But let's get back to, because a lot of this also had to do with sometimes shit happens in life.
No.
And unexplained stuff that you can't explain otherwise than it just happened. You run into somebody you haven't seen in 5 years. Oh, what a coincidence. No, there are no coincidences.
Mm.
And once you go into that mindset, that everything is a message from the divine, that everything has a purpose. Sorry, but sometimes stuff just happens.
Yep. It's a dreadful, awful trap to be seeking to interpret everything around you as if there is intentionality in the universe, that
And
everything is a message.
here's the one that trapped me. Because just as a joke at the job, I was in the activities department in a nursing home. And later that would become a big career for me. I was the person who would sing songs to people at the nursing home, or play bingo with them or take them on van rides. We were in a meeting and we were talking about tabloid newspapers and how they always predicted the end of the world. And I said, oh, yeah, sure. And I just wrote down a date that was like 2 years from that date as the end of the world, stuck it on the back of the bulletin board. It got piled up with papers. That was a few years from when we started our story. Okay. Now, so I want to talk, but just put a pin in that and we'll forget about it for a bit. But on the first night that Jeff and I met, and I first want to say, there was never any sexual attraction between us. It was immediately clear that whatever kinship we had was a sibling relationship. And I have throughout my life often felt an immediate sibling relationship to a guy, and then he becomes de facto a brother to me. So that, and this felt like that, because I want that to be clear, because we sat and talked until the coffee house shut down. Then we went to the pizza parlor and talked until that shut down. And then we went to his dorm room.
Did you get free donuts when Kelly closed
Oh,
down?
Yeah, we got free donuts.
Just wanted to make
Kelly
sure of that.
actually kind of gave me a side glance, put a pin in that too. He was like, you're talking to him?
Shouldn't have given
What I
him
didn't
free
realize
donuts.
was Jeff already had a bit of a reputation around town
Mm.
for being crazy, loud, and a little bit of a smartass. If you said, you're talking to, well, that's what you think. A little bit of a smile and a very annoying little smile. Well, I know better than you do. Smirk.
Of course.
Yeah. So we went to his, and he was like, and this is the white notebook, and this will be and it was always, this will be very important, and this will be this big thing, and this will be
can I just check something? He had a white book and a blue book.
Yes.
For anybody that wants to look up the English stand-up comedian Max Miller from the 1940s, he too had a white book and a blue book. And you can guess what kind of jokes were in the blue book. But so maybe, spiritually in another universe.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, no, I mean, there were also, this is the green notebook, and this is the famous poems that are going to be published, and this is going to be the basis of our work. And then he sat me down, and now I know what happened was a hypnosis session. But he said, I'm going to teach you astral projection. And we sat 3 feet apart, eyes closed. Is this sounding familiar to any Scientologists?
Or indeed to anybody who's read the Aleister Crowley passage that Ron Hubbard took it from.
This guy had all sorts of Crowley stuff, Crowley books, and said that, see this tarot deck? This has got the spirit of Aleister Crowley trapped in it. Yeah. And he knew he did because he had a Robin Wood deck and it had eaten the Robin Wood deck. That is, he'd put the Robin Wood deck in the same place, and when he came back, there wasn't anything left of the Robin Wood deck.
Yeah. Go figure.
I'm sorry. Why did I believe this?
Oh
So
dear.
he took me and he said, imagine yourself getting bigger, getting smaller, getting bigger, getting smaller. Imagine seeing this room. Imagine seeing the room ceiling becoming clear. And we went on what he called the ground tour, which was the tour of the solar system.
Hubbard called it that as well.
Well,
I
I found out all of
probably
that's
did too.
I found out later all of this was Hubbard stuff via Crowley.
Mm,
And jeez. So, and then we went to various lodges where he would, and at the time it was as real could be.
mm,
I could, because I've always had a really good imagination, I could envision, as he described to me, the Silver Lodge, and here's this person walking up to us, and then he'd have a conversation with them.
mm.
And even though I was not spiritually advanced enough to hear their side of the conversation, but he would interpret for me.
Oh well, we were all kids once. What can I say?
I'm sorry. I haven't brought up all of this for a very long time.
Mm.
And just to say it out loud, I'm feeling so stupid.
Well, I was in Scientology, so what am I going to say? I can't
Okay.
criticize anybody for their
So
belief.
we went through, and everybody who saw me hailed me and, she's back. Oh, we missed you. Where have you been? Why haven't you checked in? And I got the feeling that I was somebody very spiritually important who hadn't been around. And then he took me down to Atlantis. And all of a sudden, there was Poseidon, Neptune, call him what you will, saying, wife, where hast thou been? I have not been able to come into my own because I have been without you. It's
There
like,
you go.
really? Huh? And I mean, I had told him about my spiritual attachment to water, but he filled it in for me that here I am. So he knew how to play on what I'd given him.
Mm.
I can't believe that I didn't think of that until. So I went home and I thought, oh my goodness, instead of being this master's degree without the terminal PhD, because in music, an MM, a master of music, is not enough to study at school. You have to go on and get the DMA, the Doctor of Musical Arts, to
Mm.
teach at a decent university. So I was kind of like, without that other degree, which I've never gotten. So I was without that. I was without my family. I'd been broken up and I was in a strange town. Who would I rather be? This amazing spiritual creature that was going to help the world become better, or this stupid dropout graduate student who was stuck in a rut? A lot of what we believe is what we want to believe.
Mm. Most of what we believe is what we want to believe,
Yeah.
negative or positive.
I mean, I think that a lot, probably 90%, I make some enemies here. 90% of the belief of an afterlife is probably because we don't want to die.
Sure, and
I mean, since my
Specker
mom's
is
died and I've had my mortality right in my face,
yeah.
it's been a struggle for me not to go, well, maybe there is an afterlife. And
And your mum's waiting to punish you there.
No, no.
Of
She's waiting to give me a big hug, and
course she is.
we'd make up, and we had a complex relationship in life, and I'd like to think that we'd have a better one in an eternity.
You probably will, or
Yeah.
in one of the future lives that you've already had.
Well, that was the other thing, was that my mother was also somebody else, and that this person was this, and
Mm.
so that, but then a lot of people, including most of the people that I worked with at the nursing home, were constructs. That is,
Constructs.
empty shells,
Mm.
doll bodies
Mm.
that were just walking along without souls, pretending to be human beings for us to react off of. In fact, there were only, guess what number of real souls on the planet?
144.
144,000.
Mm. Just like it says in the Bible, and the Jehovah's Witnesses used to believe until there were millions of them and they
Oh, and
couldn't
I
believe it
found that
anymore.
later on, years later, while I was still a decent pagan, somebody came to a party that I was at, and she said, "I just heard there are only 144,000 of us really on this planet." And everybody, I was like, "You." I gave her what for, and of course, everybody thought I was the bad guy for
Mm.
daring to put down this belief of hers.
Mm.
Because it's a very, it's, and now I know it's Lifton's dispensing of experience, dispensing of
Existence.
existence. Thank you.
Yeah.
Dispensing of existence, that these people don't exist. They're
Mm.
not real. They don't have real
Yes.
lives.
So we can do whatever we like to them and it won't really matter.
Exactly. So now I find out from Kelly and some various other people, you really don't want to hang out with him, but it's like, he's fun.
Mm.
I always had a blast hanging out with him, or at least in the beginning, because we
Mm.
talk about bizarre esoteric subjects. And like you, as much as I hate to compare the two of you, he knew some great music. He introduced me to a great band called Dead Can Dance that I'm still a fan of.
Mm.
Um, he knew a lot of art and theater, and actually knew some decent stuff.
Mm.
So I thought, well, if he knows this, he must know his stuff about this. And that became a thought stopping phrase for me. Nope, he knows his stuff.
Mm.
We go, oh, he's a little strange. Are you sure? He knows his stuff.
Mm.
And okay, so then I got in quite an argument with one of the last friends that I had from grad school. Was like, he really is dangerous. Please don't hang out with him. And it just pushed me even more into believing with him.
Yeah.
And so I went to work that next day, and for one reason or another, I decided to clean off my bulletin board. And I found underneath 2 years of detritus a little note saying, "End of the world." And the date was that very next day.
Mm.
And I said to myself, okay, a lot of old friends telling me that this guy Jeff's no good, and Jeff's telling me that we've got important spiritual work to do. The whole world's existence hangs on what we do for the
Mm.
whole agonized future of mankind. He didn't
Every
say it.
man, woman, and child. Yeah.
He
And it
didn't
will be
say it in
agonizing.
those words, but he
Mm.
said
That's a reference to Scientology to anybody that has the
that
good
didn't know.
fortune never to have been
And if
involved with
you don't
Scientology.
know that reference already, what are you doing here?
Well,
But
okay, moving on swiftly.
moving on swiftly. So I decided that I'd go to the coffee shop. And if my old friend showed up, I would go back to being me,
Mm.
birth me, my little self in my little world in reality with very few prospects, working a dead end job in a dead end town. And And if Jeff arrived, I would dedicate myself fully.
Mm.
Well, Jeff walked through the door. And he had a guy with him. Now, we had been, ever since that hypnosis trip, looking for the incarnation of Neptune because he was due to join us. And then our group would be really rolling down once we had the god power of a major Greco-Roman god behind us. Why did I believe this again?
No, there are people who spend their lives following the Grateful Dead. Why did they do that? Because they loved the music. Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so
You
yeah,
like the story, you know, you wanted to be part of the
it was,
story.
and I felt that I was meant for something greater. And also my altruistic self was like, you mean there's going to be a great calamity and everybody's going to die except for a few people, and we're going to be the ones who are going to scrape humanity out from the dust and lift them up and teach them magic and thought, and that magic and physics are one and the same?
I want Scientologists to survive World War III.
Yeah, because I don't know if I mentioned before, there was this thing called the conflagration. I forget exactly what he called it.
The Great Conflagration.
Conflagration, I forget.
Apocalypse, Armageddon, Apocalypso, if you want a song for it.
I forget what he called it. I really honestly do. But that we were all going to create this magic community, and people were going to realize that magic and physics were one, and magic and science were one. And then the forces of good and evil would reconcile.
Oh,
And
well,
Jeff
that's
would
nice.
speak the word of the eon and bring the earth into balance
Any day now.
any day now. And he said, I have first found out that this is true, that actually Neptune was more aligned with who we think Pluto is now. That there,
Pluto!
that there was
Walt Disney did that actual Mickey
that he
Mouse
was a
voice.
dark god, though. That Neptune was a dark death god, so he was going to be.
And Pluto is Hades, the Lord of the
Hades,
Underworld. One of
Lord
the,
of the
you have
Underworld.
Zeus, or the
Yeah,
three brothers,
yeah.
like the
But
Marx Brothers, but
earlier
without Zeppo.
on in the pre-Mycenaean,
Before there were any mice. Yeah, the pre-Mycenaean. Yeah. Am
that
I not getting this?
he was more of a death god too, that the Lord of the Ocean was also the Lord of the Underworld, because, well, you've got a seafaring folk, and most of your deaths are from sea. Makes sense. So we were looking for the incarnation of Neptune, Poseidon, whoever you want to call him.
The
And
watery god.
we tons of guys had come through the coffee shop. Is he him? No, he's not him. Now, unbeknownst to me, Jeff had in his dorm room a pair of blue sunglasses that he had decided the next man who would pick them up would be the incarnation.
Such a scientific approach. Incredible.
And that day earlier, he had met this guy who had come to couch surf on his girlfriend's in his girlfriend's dorm room. Classy. As she moved in at Bowling Green. And I want to say, these kids are all 7 years younger than I am, including Jeff. Why? But he was so damn confident,
So he was about 19 or 20 at this time, Jeff.
Yeah. He was actually, he'd taken a gap year, so he was 22, 23.
Okay.
But there was this admittedly handsome-ish guy behind him. Not the kind of guy I would have ever gotten involved with. And he had come into Jeff's dorm room because it was right next door to his girlfriend that he had followed. He wasn't at college, but she had was going to college, and he, high school dropout, was coming to sleep on her couch in the dorm for a few weeks.
Fair enough.
What this kid did was he couch surfed. That was his profession, I found out. His
Yeah.
name was Chris. And that fateful day at the coffee shop, when Jeff walks in, Chris is behind him because Chris had picked up the blue sunglasses and said, "These are neat." So, Alara Wanda, that's what he called me. Because this is years before anybody. For those who don't know, Spike is not my birth name.
Shock.
Spike was
Horror.
given to me by my current husband about 23 years ago now.
Because of your love for Spike Jones.
Yes, as a matter of fact. In fact, in part of the mythology that Jeff gave me was I was the reincarnation of Spike Jones.
Okay, there you go.
Well, he died 18 months before my birthday to the
So
day.
what were you doing for those 18 months then? That's a bit
9
wide.
months in between and then 9 months in my mom's womb.
Oh, so you went straight in at conception rather than picking up the body when it was
No, I
born?
spent 9 months in between, just 9 months in between in the in-between land and then went in at conception.
Know that Jimi Hendrix was born 9 months after Charlie Christian died.
No, I did not know that.
There
So
you go. So the first of the electric guitarists, Charlie Christian,
yeah.
one of the
And we know
inventors of
that
bebop.
absolutely must be true then.
Yeah, I think it proves it. Yeah. Good. I'm glad well, Spike Jones, and we put a link to Spike Jones in, for anybody that hasn't seen Spike Jones, Spike
Great
Jones is
stuff, great stuff.
absolutely brilliant.
But in any case, so all my other friends were calling me Karen, which is a name I have, even though I was born with, I have never, ever connected with. I've never liked it. That was another bit of evidence that was used to say that I was a spirit beyond my body because I
Yeah.
didn't like my own name.
Mhm.
So he called me Alara Wanda. Alara Wanda, this is Chris. Chris, this is Alara Wanda. You have a lot to talk about. And then he dragged us off to the local park and we were married that night.
What about his girlfriend and her couch?
Well, his girlfriend was Jeff's soulmate.
Oh, that's convenient.
He decided that he liked Leslie. That was her name. She's a lovely, lovely girl, Leslie. And she did not deserve all the shit that was going to happen to her over the next few months, because can you imagine that a cult leader is a very good boyfriend?
Probably not. I mean, Ron Hubbard was not a very good husband or father, so.
No. And although Chris was probably not the best boyfriend for her either, but he said, "You are my soulmate," and all of a sudden she was his, and Chris was given me.
And this marriage, I'm presuming, was something that Jeff performed?
Jeff performed it. Yes, it was never a legal
27,000 years
marriage.
into the future, or
It was never a legal marriage, but he went home with me that night, and for the next 2 years we lived together as husband and wife. So yeah, I went home and actually had a wedding night. It was like, what the and we
with a
knew
stranger
with a stranger, which is
who
something
happened to be the
but I was
overlord of the
always
sea.
but the thing was, this guy and I, we were never very good for each other. I was always being chided that I was too vanilla,
Mm.
that I was too
What flavor were you meant to be?
conservative. Well, I wasn't supposed to be as sexually repressed as I was. The fact that I had never gone home with and had myself a one-night stand before was wrong. I should be more sexually liberated. The fact that
Always a good start to a marriage. Okay.
yeah, the fact that I did not enjoy pain as part of the sexual experience.
Okay.
Yeah. The fact that I didn't enjoy bondage, the fact that I didn't also the fact that I was in the wrong body. turned out. Because as soon as Chris came, Chris and Jeff became really tight. And now Jeff was very intelligent. Chris wasn't.
Hmm.
Chris was never the sharpest knife in the drawer, but he was very good at parroting what Jeff said and
Hmm.
making Jeff feel good.
Hmm.
And
Could I just point out, I know this is a terrible interruption, but vanilla is actually a great flavoring, very
it
expensive. And,
is.
we shouldn't,
We shouldn't no, we shouldn't diss vanilla, and I
no.
actually, just as a side note, have gotten very into how vanilla is grown and can exposit on a lot because my own science fiction novel, I go into it in great detail as a
Well, I
plot.
should think vanilla has become very important to you since you found out that you are vanilla, So,
That was just a label that they used. The other thing
I
was,
know,
though, a
meaning
lot
plain,
but
meaning
as soon
ordered.
as Chris came and the demon to my angel showed up, because that's what he was, and he had no idea that he was Neptune until Jeff told him. He's like, "Really? Wow. Okay. I guess I
Had to think of
am."
tridents. Yeah.
Yeah, well, he was this couch surfing guy who enjoyed hardcore thrash, and seemed Leslie and he is kind of broken up anyway, and they were but he was staying on her couch anyway, so Leslie went right to Jeff because he was brooding, mysterious, and
And declaimed.
declaimed. And poor Leslie, poor Leslie.
Mm,
She, Chris brought a lot of. He was able to yes and a lot of Jeff's stuff,
mm.
so he was able to go yes and then also, so that not only was I this, but I'd been born in the wrong body. I was supposed to be tall, blonde, and beautiful. Apparently, I was neither of these. No, I'm not tall or blonde, but I'd like to think I was reasonably cute at that age.
You could always have dyed your hair and walked on stilts.
But I had been born in the wrong body.
Oh,
And I got a lot of flack for that. That became part of, and as Chris and Jeff became together, my status got lower and lower and lower and lower. Because at first it was me and Jeff. Then Chris came, then Leslie came, then a couple of other people came in. And as each person came in, my status got lower and lower and lower.
mm. Yep, can happen.
And so we'd go on road trips where we were supposed to meet various members of the OTO who were going to pick us up in their limousine because, unbeknownst to them, Jeff was their leader.
Mm.
Jeff was the leader of the OTO and the Illuminati.
The OTO is the group that
Ordo
Alistair Crowley,
Templo, yeah,
Orientalis, is that it?
sorry. Ordo Templi or Orientalis, I think. Yes. Crowley's group. Yes.
Well, the group that Crowley was given, he didn't found it. It was a German group
Yeah.
closely related to the Tool group, which had Himmler and Rudolf Hess in it. But that's probably just a coincidence.
Yeah. Well, and around this time, I was the one who had to initiate, because I was the angel, so I had to initiate Jeff into the Order of the Golden Dawn in order so that he could take it over and reconcile it with the OTO.
And again, the Order of the Golden Dawn was MacGregor Mathers was the group that Crowley left to run the OTO. W.B. Yeats, the incredible Irish poet, was a bit of a lunatic and a member of the Golden Dawn. Hubbard used to refer to the Golden Dawn as well, thinking that his members wouldn't know what, that it was a sly allusion to a ritual magic group.
And I mean, there were always little bits and pieces that I would go use as proof. Like, for instance, he taught me in pretty much a couple of days a pretty decent interpretation of the tarot deck. And I was able to learn it right away. And he said, well, that's because back in time, you and Merlin wrote it together.
Yeah, of course. I knew that. You and
Yeah.
Merlin.
Me and Merlin, who was his son. Let's see, Jeff was also the reincarnation of Judas Iscariot.
Yeah, I could have told you that. I met
Um,
somebody else who claimed that actually,
he
so there are
also
two.
shared a soul with Kurt Cobain and who's the guy in charge of Nine Inch Nails? Trent Reznor.
Yeah, who wrote Hurt, of course.
Yeah, and he shared a soul with Trent Reznor. Trent Reznor just focused on the music and he did the magic.
Hmm.
Because apparently you can share souls across bodies with different people.
Well, and of course you can have body thetans as well, so you can have thousands of souls and you can move them around all over the place if you feel like it. Oh dear.
I know, and it got weirder and weirder and weirder, but by this point I was already in.
Hmm.
And the sunk cost fallacy. I'd already spent all this time. If I'd gotten out of it, I would look like a hell of a fool.
Hmm. Yeah, and the sunk cost fallacy, throwing good money after bad. But as Cialdini says in Influence, which everybody ought to read, and we have done a thing. We've even got you made a little fridge, something for
Yes.
people to put in their fridge poster, which everybody should download. But he talks about consistency or commitment. I tend to call it inertia, that we either stay still because we're still, or we move in the direction we're going. So once you've invested in something, it's normal to keep investing in it. And we have to learn to stop and go,
Yeah.
well, maybe that Nigerian prince isn't genuine. And the £200 I've sent and the 2,000 more he's asking for, maybe that's not, maybe I haven't won the Dutch lottery.
Deeper I got into this, the less attached I got to anybody else in reality.
Yeah.
So there was no life to return to.
Yes.
He also had somebody who had been his second before I joined him.
Mm.
Somebody I only knew as DM, not Dungeon
DM.
Master or David Miscavige or
David
but
Mayo.
and he was the reason for everything bad.
Mm.
He was his what's the name of the guy in 1984, Goldstein, or an Animal Farm, Napoleon, or no, it's not Napoleon, it's Snowball.
Mm.
He was
Snowball.
the evil guy who was so that when Jeff asked me to write this symbol of string of symbols down, and he told me it's a spell designed to drive anybody who reads it crazy. Well, why aren't I crazy? Oh, because you don't understand it. And drop it in somebody's book bag. And that was supposed to spiritually kill them. I was willing to do this.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Naughty Spike.
all I probably did was look at it and go, what the fuck? But I was ready to do that. We went and Chris was like, I want that pair of boots. Well, I don't have enough money to buy them. You must buy them for me, wife. It's the spiritually needed at this point. So for the first time, I started bouncing checks.
Oh no.
Because I was told I needed to buy this, I needed to buy that. I didn't smoke. I was keeping it, but I was keeping up his two carton a month habit. He was sleeping on my floor. Then we met these two guys from Michigan who had just escaped another dysfunctional mini cult and come to join our dysfunctional mini cult.
Hey.
And one of them was, I forget what his name was, but we always called him Mercury because he was the incarnation of the god Mercury.
Or Hermes, who delivers parcels.
Well, basically what he delivered was backstabbing information. So that one point when Jeff was getting really on us at something, you need to do this, you need to learn this, you need to learn that, and he used to be wonderful and sunshiny, and then Chris came and he got a little darker, and then all of a sudden we started getting yelled at, and then it wasn't so nice, and then it wasn't. So there was this progression of everything's nice, warm, sunshine, and rainbows, but now we have to do this because this is serious business now. And so after there was this week where he'd been telling Chris that Chris had sinned in another concurrent lifetime in a concurrent universe, and that if he didn't shape up his act, both he and I would be erased. Not just killed, erased. And we were like all talking, and Mercury was there, and he said, maybe we should write up a little poem for him to let him know that we love him and we appreciate him, but we really need him to step up and be a gentler leader. And then he presented this poem going, see, these people are mutinying against you. Oh, and it was always things like, you need to buy this thing because I need to do this. And I was the only one with any money and any job. So these two guys ended up living on the floor of my apartment. And I had to make a series of spiritual promises where I would promise not to call them sponges, promise not to view them as sponging off of me, promise that and it was my spiritual training to clean up after them, because then there was another lifetime that they said I had been this evil guy in England, a minor peer who had raped his daughter and killed his son, and I was making up for that lifetime by being the woman and cleaning and
emptying the ashtrays. Yeah.
And it became, yeah, but it was like this slow progression, and I realize I haven't covered it and talked about it now, and I'm sorry that I keep going back and forth. As they say as she says in The Handmaid's Tale, I wish this tale was in one whole piece rather than in fractured parts. But remember, this was 20 years ago, and I bring points back as I remember them.
Of course.
That it was. And poor Leslie was then told that she had to become more virginal for him,
Become more virginal.
for Jeff. And then she had to start giving up money, and she had to start giving up classes. I was asked to stay away from my job to the point where it was almost influencing my job. And I was told that I could manifest the fact that my job would keep going, that nobody would notice that I'd taken all of this sick leave off. And as Chris got more and more into the you're in the wrong body, he started shoving me and pushing me and hitting me. And every time I would object, I would be told that he hadn't done it. My ego had jumped out of my body and into his body and abused me to punish me for spiritual. It was some gaslighting, and I want to reach back in time to my 20-something self and shake her by the shoulders and say, run!
Well, it sounds as if you were being shaken by the shoulders, and according to the explanation, it was you doing it. So, you fulfilled that. Yeah, but
yeah.
let's stop at that point and say that, it is a matter of the extent to which we integrate and digest our experience, and that when we go back and think about the horrible things that we've experienced, they remain horrible.
Yeah, and I really haven't thought about this for years. It's just been kind of pushed aside, and I integrated it. We'll get into it, but after I got out, I read every single book, including Steve's Combating Cult Mind Control, Margaret Singer's Cults Among Us,
Cults in Our Midst. Yeah.
Cults in Our Midst. Yes, you're right. And Langoni's book.
Recovery from Cults.
Recovery from Cults. Those three.
Which he edited. It's not his book.
Oh. Well, those 3 books
Mm.
really helped me. I wish Your Opening Minds had been available, but
Well, you'd have to travel forward in time.
help you write it.
Mm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was this spiral as more people joined, my status got lower and things got crazier because it wasn't just books, it was also TV shows that Jeff would assign us characters out of the TV shows. You're this character, you're that character. And then we would be punished or rewarded based on the actions of a TV character.
So it makes perfect sense to me. Oh,
And
dear.
that it was also mail. There was something called mail, where a song would come on the radio and that was mail. Because he had made each of us swear a certain thing. He called it the oath of the abyss. And the oath was, I swear that I will from now on take every single thing I come across, I forget how it was worded, as a message from the divine. So even what the waiter said to you,
Mhm.
and everything was attached. One night I was, don't do this at home, kids. I was lighting cream packets on fire, those little liquid creamers. You could actually make them go. And if you surround them with enough napkins, it's a nice show and only a little bit of cleanup.
Okay.
So don't do this at home, kids.
No,
But I
no,
was doing that
definitely
and
not.
it annoyed Jeff and he made me stop. On my way home, there was a barn on fire.
See what you did?
My fault.
Yeah.
Um, let's see, I'm trying to think. Oh, yes, and then he got into live action role-playing games, LARPs.
Mm.
They still are around where people will, it's like Dungeons and Dragons, only instead of at a table, you're actually acting it out with swords and blunted swords and whatever, and paintballs for spells and things like that. And hey, shakone songu. I'm not gonna judge.
Oh,
Lord
no.
knows I'm not gonna judge. But he got into Vampire the Masquerade just as it had just come out. This back in '90s, remember? And he had decided that he was going to use this game as a way to get more people in, but everybody at that thing thought he was kind of weird, so they kind of killed him in the game, and he came back to my place angry.
Mm.
And he said something as he got in the door of my apartment that just sort of set me off like, God, again, he's on my case. And I turned around and said, you know, you really don't have to be this way. So he decided that it had been all my fault, that he hadn't been good at at Masquerade. And now I needed to know what the pain was of being embraced by a vampire and turned into a vampire.
Yeah.
So, and now you could probably speak to this as part of the hypnosis, that what you believe does become real and
Mm.
what you have been primed to believe does become real.
You
Because
experience it. You experience it as reality in the same way. Yeah.
he sat me down and he said, I'm going to play this song for you 23 times. And it was some grunge rock song, Nine Inch Nails or some or worse. And every time you hear the singer hit this note, you will feel like your blood is on fire. And every time it repeats, it will get that much worse. And he sat me down.
Mm.
I mean, and I still don't know why. Well, I do know why, because of suggestibility.
Mm.
And I had given him spiritual cachet over me. And Alan Watts, you give somebody spiritual responsibility over, you're enabling them to pick your pocket.
Yeah,
So that
you're letting
I
them
did.
steal your watch, yeah.
I did, John.
Mm,
I felt incredible pain
mm,
listening to this song. Just from that, it did, because he had primed me and I imagined it.
yeah. And pain is, still a huge mystery to us. We know that pain has a nerve aspect, a
Mhm.
neuronal aspect, but we also know that it has a profound subjective aspect, that you can learn to tolerate pain, or pain can become so horrible to you, you just can't stand it. And
And actually,
he
yeah.
made your blood boil.
And actually, in normal life, I have a pretty high pain threshold, as a matter of fact.
Mm.
Um, I have watched as a wasp stung me in the palm of my hand just because, and yes, it hurt, but I was deliberately trying not to hurt because I was so fascinated by watching the actual physical thing of the wasp actually doing that. It was fascinating.
Yeah.
So to have my blood literally boiled, I was wrapped in a fetal position by the end, and of course, "Oh, I'm so sorry. Sorry is
20
for losers."
23 times.
Yeah.
And I don't think it did literally boil your blood.
No,
We
no, but it felt that way, and it
metaphorically, we
hurt,
might have done, yeah. Yeah,
and
absolutely. Horrible.
I was willing to follow this man, and, I mean, if he had told me, "Here's a knife, go kill this person," I that's a horrible thing to think. It really is. But
But I
he
mean, Steve Hassan, when he talks about his 2 years in the moon, he said, if he'd been asked to kill somebody or himself, he'd have done it.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I'm kind of lucky that I've never been in a situation of that kind. So that's
Well,
never
I
been
almost got in
tested.
one, and we're gonna demonetize ourselves right here because it comes time to talk about the blood bonding.
Okay.
And that is, it was a ritual to bond me and Chris together forever, for eternity as one soul.
Mm.
And what was supposed to happen was he'd written down this incantation in Enochian, which is something you learn in the Golden Dawn and the OTO. It's even got its own alphabet and everything. It's supposedly the angelic language. And I learned a few passing phrases in it.
The Enochian is from Enoch.
Yeah, Enoch. Yeah. And I learned a few phrases and actually did meditations in it all the time during
Mm.
that time. But we were supposed to read out an incantation in Enochian, and then I would cut his arm and pour blood into a cup, and he would cut my arm and pour my blood into a cup, and we would drink it together.
Yuck.
Well, we only got as far as um me cutting his arm, and it was too deep, and we had to go to the hospital. And of course,
Uh,
we made up a story that he was chopping onions and I had shouted at a mouse or something, and he had been startled and cut into his arm instead of the onions. And I'm sure they really didn't believe that. Guy with a Trinity shirt on and black earrings. Yeah, right.
Cutting onions, yeah. Carrots maybe, but onions
And the
never.
thing is, this is what I feel bad is because to this day, he probably still has nerve damage from that and a hearty scar. But
Oh
on
well.
the but Jeff and Leslie joined us in the emergency room, and the whole ride home, first of all, they started calling me Karen, my birth name, because I was only Karen when I was being bad and
Mm,
unspiritual,
mm.
and saying, "We don't like you, Karen. We hate you, Karen. You're," and I'm the one driving the fucking car to my fucking apartment where they're going to be eating my food. I'm sorry, this is me much later reacting to in those, "I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I did wrong," because
Mm.
my ego had jumped into the knife and made it cut him too deep. And so we were never going to do blood bonding because I had
And, and
messed it.
and by ego, we mean egotism. We don't mean the self, which is
No,
the
we
actual
mean the
ego.
self. the self that would have been taken out, because in his thing, you had to shed the self, the ego, the self, the born-in creature. He probably had it totally wrong, but that was his definition, was
Well, it's the egotism. It's the quality of the self. Unless one is becoming Buddhist and saying that you must destroy the
that's
self,
what he
anatta.
that's what he meant. He had
Okay.
that all mixed up, but it was you were going to cross the abyss and shed your ego, yourself, and become your higher self.
All right. So there are two selves involved here. Okay. This
Yeah,
is not
it was
Buddhism.
your
You have
no,
no alternate self in
he had his
Buddhism.
own system. He had his
Yeah,
own
yeah.
system, and in our system, the ego was the self that had been born into your body that needed to be
But
shed once you
yeah,
crossed
this
the
is kind of Paul Brunton mysticism from the 30s, who was dreadful.
yeah.
Um,
So it was my
Jeffrey
ego.
Masson's book
Yeah,
about Brunton is
yeah.
excellent. My Father's Guru.
Because and they had all Jeff and Chris had gone and taken acid and shed their egos, but I had not been able to yet. And they, during that acid trip, had wondered whether I was for or against them.
Mm.
We
I'm
also had
wondering that
assigned holy
now.
guardian angels, and during this trip, they had summoned up my holy guardian angel and found that it was false.
How could you?
I know. And so I had to get another one. And during another trip, they decided that that one was false. Then we went to Michigan on a little camping jaunt to Michigan, where there's these little, the state of Michigan, there's these little wayside campsites that you can pull into and then pay the next day. But we never paid because we just went. We all took acid. It was my first time.
Mm.
And then I was made to kneel on gravel while tripping on acid and told that I was now no longer who I was, and they were putting a new soul into my body, and this soul was a new soul that was going to be obedient. And then I was made to drive everybody home
With grazed knees.
with grazed knees, throwing up on the way because all I'd had to eat was a bunch of lemon cookies.
Mm. So there's advice. If you're going to take LSD and kneel on gravel, children, don't eat lemon cookies.
Don't eat lemon, or just eat the lemon cookies and leave the LSD and the gravel out of it.
Probably a better idea, all in all, spiritually. So the ego and the soul are different things here. Because I'm getting,
Yes. Yeah, I
oh,
know. I realize now that he was like Hubbard. He took little bits and pieces and totally misinterpreted them and then stuck them in places like a jigsaw where because it doesn't fit, you cut the little knob off so that it fits back.
yeah.
And so all of these very frightful things. And that now I was this new creature and I was a robot and I was allowed to cross the abyss finally and shed because it was no longer there, so it didn't matter anyway. But still, my ego kept slipping back and being disrespectful, because sometimes I just roll my eyes because things were object when once again Jeff came and told us all that Chris had done something horrible in a future lifetime, and we were all going to die if he didn't fix it now. Or because I'd been raised by a bunch of proper feminists, and he was writing a list of who he had, and he had Neptune and wife, and it was like, I'm more than just Neptune's wife. I mean, these days I probably wouldn't have even bothered, but back then it just being called just somebody's wife without a name of my own, they bumped up against my little feminist self, I will say.
Well, you don't really need to be a feminist to be insulted by being referred to in such a way. I cannot for the life of me. I mean, it was Zeus and Hera,
Yeah.
but who was Poseidon or Neptune's missus? I don't remember.
He didn't have a missus in the mythology that I could see.
Oh, that is so sad.
He had several girlfriends that he raped,
Girlfriends
including
that he
Medusa.
raped. There's a bit of a
Yeah,
conflict there. The word
including
friend and
Medusa.
the word rape. Oh, well, we'll have to go back to our Ovid and see how it metamorphosizes.
Yeah.
Metamorphs.
So any case, meanwhile at my job, there I am, trying to earn a living enough to keep these guys all together. And the place wasn't very well run. They lost their ability to train their nurses' aides. Now, if you're in elder care, most places train their own CNAs, certified nursing assistants. And if they lose the certification to do that, that's not a good thing. And they did. And so they did a survey to find out which departments were happy. And they found that the only department that didn't think it was short-staffed was the activities department. So what did they do? Come on, John. What do you think they did?
Well, I'm hoping that they put you in another department to make it work properly, by not having the
They cut
activity
the
department.
jobs in the activity department by half.
Yeah.
Because we were the only ones who weren't understaffed. So make us understaffed too.
Perfect logic. Which shows that it's not just cults that have crazy thinking going on in them. It's also the health service.
Well, this was also a Wesleyan and I was used to my Eastern Methodists who are all really kind of chill folks, and these were one day somebody was being given a tour. She was the woman who had donated money for this building or donated the land. It used to belong to her now. And she pointed the calendar and said, "What denomination is that minister?" I said, "Oh, well, he's Lutheran." And she said, "What type of Lutheran?" I said, "Well, I don't know. I'm sure God doesn't mind." And she went, "Yes, it does. There is only one true form of Christianity and only one true form of Lutheranism."
Quite
I got in
too.
trouble for that.
Yeah,
I
so
got in trouble for saying that God didn't care what denomination a minister would be.
He
Our
does.
chaplain was Presbyterian. I would not have made it through without this guy. His name was Lyle Loomis. And one day, because of all the money that I'd been spending on these creeps, I was not able to keep my phone on. And he said, "How much do you need?" I said, "I need $250. He said, "Here it is." I said, "I'll pay you back." No. Pay it forward, my dear. Sorry.
Oh, shout out for Lyle Loomis. There we go.
I'm sorry. This is much more emotional than I thought I'd be. But so I was one of the people who wasn't going to lose their job, but something in me said, "Wait a minute," because Jeff had been talking for a while about setting up a magical college in Boston. Now, Burlington is about 4 hours north of Boston. I lied and said it was 2 hours north of Boston. Made it a bit more of a drivable distance and said, "This is a gift from the universe. The universe is pushing me out of Ohio and I must go home." And I called my mom, and bless her, within 24 hours, she had this condo ready for me to go. We may have had our problems, but when I needed her, she came through. She and her wife furnished this place for me to come home to. 24 hours.
There we go.
She had the wherewithal to do it because during this time my grandfather had died, but I hadn't mourned him because he had been a construct.
Of course. Construct.
Yeah. But so I went home. The deal was I was at first going to go with Chris because Chris was now my spiritual teacher. And I said, "But he beats me. How can he be my spiritual teacher?" Only to be told, "It's only a problem if you make it a problem." Because it was mine. my disobedience that was making him hit me anyway. So, and the hitting never got, it never got more than a bit of shoving and occasional scratches and things. It was never full on beating. So I never identified it at the time. And usually he'd just stand there in front of me and block my way. And I didn't understand that that was just as much domestic abuse as anything else.
Yeah.
People don't understand that it doesn't have to be full on fist hitting. It can be scratching. It can be pushing. It can be
Doesn't have to be physical at
doesn't
all.
even have to be, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
about the fear and the intimidation and the control.
And the level of control, the fact that this guy had complete spiritual control over me. But he was supposed to come, but my mother put her foot down and said, he needs to have a job. You need to find a job first.
Mm.
Now, this was during a recession, but because I had good creds and I've always dressed up well and talked well, I was able in a week to find a job at a nursing home here
Mm.
as an activities person. So I came home, and then once I got a job, Chris came and joined me, and my mom opened her heart and her wallet and bought him clothes and bought him, and then on the understanding that her daughter loved this guy, so this was her son-in-law, so she was going to be good to him.
Yep.
However, in Chris's narrative, now, yes, I come from a family that has had a little bit of money. I have grown up with much more privilege than a lot of people. Does that mean that I'm a criminal somehow? In the eyes of I was bourgeoisie. I was meant to have my back against the wall when the revolution comes because I was upper middle class, well educated. So,
Just like Lenin, actually.
but he would take all the gifts, he would take all the clothes, take everything that Ginge bought for him, my mom, and but still, condemn it as a show of wealth.
Mm.
Rather than this woman opening her wallet and heart to somebody she never met, just on the basis that her daughter, who she was so glad to have back in her life, was coming back home again. But he would get a job at a restaurant as a dishwasher and then quit because they were all against him. And then get another job as a dishwasher somewhere else and then quit because they were all against him. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. Whereas I was doing very well in my little job. And finding out that, and there were people who were going, why are you with this guy? And seeing
So
bruises
Jeff's not
on my
around
arm.
anymore. Jeff's not around anymore. You've
Oh,
just
Jeff's
got
not
Chris.
around, but the week before Chris came, he calls me up on the phone and says, now I need you to make a magical oath. I say, just swear that you will not be angry at what I have to say. Make a magical oath. Okay. Apparently he'd ran into a friend who I had met for all of 5 minutes early on in our association. We were talking, and he came in and she left in the coffee shop. Well, fast forward 5 years now. She had come back to him and she had said that she had left because she was scared of him, and then she spent the next few years of her life addicted to heroin and on the streets. And he had decided that it was my bad energy that had pushed her out away from his protection, and I was responsible karmically. That was the beginning of this can't be real. This just can't be real. And then when Chris came, and my new friends here in Vermont and old friends who met him said, he doesn't treat you very nicely. Why are you with him? Including like friends from grade school who, were reacquainting themselves with me going, my best friend from grade school that we'd been like sisters since we were 7. She's, why are you with him? He's awful to you. My mom, why, my sister, everybody was like, and then somebody at work, because I came to work late because he had made me stand there while he screamed at me.
Mm.
And I got pulled in one of the nurses' offices, and she said, "Why are you with this man again?" And finally, we got in an argument, and he pushed me down the stairs. And as I tried to run away, the front door is at the bottom of the stairs. Stairs, little jog, front door. I ran. He slammed my head into the front door. Now, I didn't get terribly injured, but I could have been.
Mm.
It hurt like hell.
Mm.
And a neighbor heard us and called the cops.
Good.
My mom found out about it because I was renting the place from her at the time. I own it now. And she said he has to go.
Mm.
And so he went and started couch surfing here. And it was all my fault. It was my bad energy that had made the neighbors call the cops. It
Mm.
was my bad energy that was keeping him from getting a decent job. It was my bad energy that was keeping him from not being thrown out of situation after situation, because he went through about 5 different apartments couch surfing. People would just get fed up with him. And Jeff would call us up in decreasing frequency, giving us stranger and stranger orders, because after I left, the guys who had been sleeping in my apartment, oh, there was a whole story. I had a whole collection of books, including a collection of original Nancy Drews in the yellow covers and the complete Agatha Christie and all sorts of other books, and I didn't have room for them, and the guys were going to keep them for me until I could afford to package them and send for them. Well, just as I'm packaging them and I'm about to leave, they say, "Yeah, we'll get some good money for that." I was walking in the conversation, "Yeah, we'll get good money for this." I said, "But you were going to keep them." "No, we promised to keep them for you until we could sell them."
Mm. There you
So,
go.
and of course, then I couldn't keep them because I was showing attachment to physical objects,
Mm. We wouldn't want
which is a
that.
no-no in many different cults.
And many different cultures, the Buddhists no attachment to dust,
Yeah.
but it's a
And I've
matter of
heard,
how we interpret the term attachment.
oh, well, I knew one guy who was abusing his status here, give me $70,000 because you're attached to it, so I need it.
Mm. Well, it's because it's more likely that a camel can get through the eye of a needle than a rich man can get into the kingdom of heaven. And I think cult leaders take pity on that position, take all your money from you, and you'll be able to go to heaven.
Do you know the eye of the needle is an actual gate in?
Yes, and I was first told that when I was 12 years old, and I'm tired
I
of
didn't
people
know
telling
that until I researched it for one
oh,
of your other
the
videos
gate in Jerusalem, yeah.
I found the picture of it. I'll put it up now because what the heck.
Mm.
I did not know that until earlier this year for one of your videos. I learned
A
so much.
piece of trivia that was given to us by our religious education instructor as to whether it's what Jesus was referring to or Jesus actually said such a thing. It's another matter.
It looks like an earthquake or something else happened and knocked a hole in the wall
Mm.
between 2 places. It really does.
Yeah.
Especially since one of the sides is right up against a staircase. I kinda don't think it was planned.
Mm. There you go.
Because
But
I wouldn't set something up like that in Minecraft, I'll tell you that.
that's good to know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you don't put a door in a staircase.
No, no. Who'd do that in Minecraft? Good grief. Insane. Absolutely insane. The point is that the cult leaders are really just taking your money from you so that you will be able to get through the eye of a needle.
Well,
And
I lost, my Agatha Christie's, my Nancy Drews, and also my high school yearbooks.
oh dear.
Yeah, don't have those because that was part of Karen's life, so
Mm.
that that wasn't. So a lot of my stuff, including like a lamp I'd made myself in shop class, whole bunch of stuff that I was going to send for later, was then given away. because I can't have attachment to stuff. But it was like, but it's my stuff. Shouldn't I choose?
Evidently not.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got Chris is out leaving the
Couch
picture.
surfing in Burlington. And finally, he, it just, so finally, Jeff's just not making sense anymore. The whole group has imploded. Bless her, has finally left him. I got a call from her a few years after that, and she said, Jeff wasn't a cult, he was just a circus. Was Jeff a cult? Was our group a cult, John?
Well, yeah, of course, but you know, a cult's just a group that's dedicated to a leader or a teaching. Was it a negative, a destructive cult? Yes. Was it an authoritarian cult? Yes. So,
Mhm.
you know, not a
And
good thing. Was it a
strange that
circus? Was it a circus? Yes.
I mean, Leslie didn't think it was a cult, when wherever she is, I wish her well. I really hope she's okay. I really hope, and maybe Chris has gotten, the last time I heard, Jeff and Chris had gone down to New Orleans, had found each other. Chris called me up saying he needed to leave Burlington, and I was supposed to pay because I brought him here, damn it, and so I should probably pay for him. I said, fuck you.
Well, you should have said borrow the money from yourself 27,000 years into the future.
Yeah, but
And
the
it
last I
wasn't
heard of
nice knowing
them,
you.
Jeff and Chris had gotten themselves to New Orleans and had gotten arrested because Jeff had a sword stick, which is illegal in certain parts of Louisiana. And
Understandably, yeah.
I could just see
Concealed
that his
weapon.
little smart ass, well, I know better than you attitude would probably have gotten his nose broken.
Mm, yeah.
And as nice as I'd like to be, I'd like to think that he did. That's horrible, isn't it?
It is horrible, yeah. We
But
don't
I
wish harm
do,
upon people,
there
but
is a part of me that hopes that maybe Chris got his head out of his ass and is maybe working for a living instead of couch surfing.
one hopes that everybody is
Yeah,
been
I mean, some of the
redeemed.
other guys, there were other guys that I didn't even mention, like the guy who was supposed to be our Buddhist, who was supposed to be the gray in the black and the white, and he was supposed to be the Buddhist and such. And mhm.
You must have performed rituals.
Oh, we did. We had
Tell us
rituals,
about
but
tell us about a ritual.
oh gosh, one of them, they were always very, it was basically Jeff babbling on psychobabble, a psycho spiritual babble, and occasionally us filling in. But if he didn't like what we said, he'd go, no, that's not the way it's supposed to be.
Mm.
Or there was one time we all took acid and then decided that there was a parade of all the angels going through a kitchen, and we were all having to sit there for a couple hours on the kitchen counters watching these invisible beings going by in my kitchen going, Hosanna, 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 Hosanna.
So singing a song from Jesus Christ Superstar. That is good to
Basically, although when I actually tried to sing that, I got told I shouldn't have done that. Then there was
know.
one time we had a lot involved listening to music and focusing while he went
Excellent.
and did interpretive dance movements, and we had to focus on him. And if we didn't, he'd go, focus.
Mm.
Uh, there was one where the guy who was the god of pain, I don't know if I'd mentioned him before, we were supposed to kick him and hit him and cuff him and everything. And he said Hecate instead of one of her other aspects. I can't remember which Luna or something. Instead of Luna, he said Hecate. And so he got kick with steel-toed boots. And then there was one ritual they did not
And
let me on because it was for the dark side, where he came back and he was bruised and could not walk for a while because they had performed, because he was the god of pain, so he had to experience himself.
mm.
Yeah, it was a wild 2.5 years.
Mm.
There were ones where One was actually kind of nice. Jeff's birthday and mine were exactly on back to front. He was the 18th of November. I was 19th of November. I wonder how much trouble I'm going to be getting in for. Well, Jeff and Chris are pretty common names, aren't they?
Well, yeah. And who cares, really? I
Yeah,
mean,
who cares?
if
But in
you,
any case, we
Jeff, if
had,
you're out there and you want to come on the show, you're welcome, mate. We'll
yeah,
hear
and
your
maybe
side of
I've
the story
remembered
as well.
some things wrong, but I've gotten the gist of it pretty much.
Mm.
Um, but we bought
But
I
we'll grant him the right to respond if he wishes to do so, so he doesn't sue you or anything.
Yeah. But in any case, I bought some lobster, which I
Mm,
love. I love
mm.
lobster. And we had a birthday party for the two of us, chocolate cake and lobster. And and I had gotten, just as a joke, the little kid hats and little plates and little noise makers. And for some reason that got turned into a ritual, but I can't even remember how.
Okay.
But it was all the things where what you do at a little birthday party, you have to do. So
Mm. Fair enough. So you to a couple of years there, you end up back at home in the place you're living now. And when was it that you well, I mean, the cult had sort of left you, really.
yeah, and Chris had kind of gone vunk, and I just realized it was all stupid. It was all not really what I wanted, but I still believed. I
Mm.
still believed very strongly in the spirits and everything until 2012. I
When
joined
the world ended on the Mayan calendar.
Yeah, I
Mm.
mean, I joined the Covenant of UU Pagans, Unitarian Universalist. Your average UU church usually has a pagan group that meets downstairs in the basement once a week and does all the pagan Sabbats like Samhain, which is Halloween, and
Mm.
Ostara, Easter, and Midsummer, and all of those. You can usually find them, and it's usually a good weaning place for people who have been in really authoritarian New Age pagan cults to go and at least still celebrate the cycle of the year and such. Um, so there was that, and also I met Wally.
Mm.
I was lonely, and I went to the UU church, and there was this guy who said, when you were a new member of the U church, and I didn't feel I was, because I'd actually been, when I was in college, I picked up extra money singing in their alto section for the choir director, who was also the choir director at UVM. He hired ringers to bolster up their choir. Because do you know why Unitarian Universalist choirs are so bad?
Go on.
Because they're always paging forward in the hymnal to see if they agree with the next verse.
Okay. That would do it.
So this guy approached me and said, "Are you a red cup person? Because you're supposed to grab a red mug if you're a new person."
Mm.
And I said, "No, actually, I used to sing in the choir." Said, "Oh, I used to sing in the choir." We started talking and hitting it off, and was like, "This guy is warm. He's actually nice. He doesn't seem to have any agenda, and gosh, he's sweet." And a couple days later, he came over and we spent the night singing old folk songs at each other. And 25 years later, we're married. And
Yeah.
it was actually just after him that I called Chris up and said I had a ring that had been Leslie's grandmother's, that she had taken from her grandmother, and then Chris had given to me. And then I think Chris sold it for drugs. I'm sure he did. But I gave it back to him, and that was the last time I saw him. And
Mm.
that was shortly after I met Wally. And
Mm.
then I just weaned myself off by reading all the books. I grabbed all the books I could,
Mm.
because it was like, wait a minute, this is spiritual abuse. What happened? Because I was in the UU church, and I know now that I just saw a recent survey that UUs were under, just above Scientology and how well they're viewed. It's like, why? Because they're liberals? because they're the one place that if a nice Catholic boy wants to marry a nice Jewish girl, that's where they go to get married? Because they don't believe in anything? I don't
Well,
know.
you have
Because
to look at who's doing the survey and making up the thing.
well, it was Antonio Ortega's bunker. And it was how well the various religions are being viewed by Joe America, so that Islam was way down there too, being for Islamophobia and such. But you were just between Scientology and Islam, is like, but maybe because also it's it was one of the first places you could get a gay wedding, even before there were gay weddings. In fact, at my wedding to Wally, we inadvertently bumped Gay Pride Day out of the UU. We didn't know.
Falling
Yeah, I'm sorry about that.
for that karmic crime. Well,
Ah,
we seem to have reached something of a possible natural conclusion.
yeah. I don't know. Is there anything else except that I want to get into what happened afterwards?
Mhm.
And what happened afterwards was I started reading everything I could, and I went on back then in 1997, the alt.religion.scientology cult, because it was the major cult survivor bulletin boards. I
ARS, yeah.
started talking to the ARS Scientology, and I started meeting ex-Scientologists. And yes, Steve's book and the other books gave me, but this was real people saying, no, you weren't crazy. My daughter's still in and she believes in body thetans. I got really close to this old guy who had lost his daughter to Scientology. He was in Germany, and he and I chatted online for a while. And this was now in Wally's apartment, and Wally was helping me get out of all of this. He just would listen for hours. And I would type with all of these ex-Scientologists. Okay, we got to rewind a bit back to in the cult. One night in the cult, this is back in Ohio, we're watching the TV and Mike Rinder's on the TV defending the indefensible. And Jeff says, well, L. Ron Hubbard was right, but for the wrong reasons. And goes on how Scientology might be a possible friend, but they're just not right for us at this time. And I looked at Mike Rinder as he was trying to defend the indefensible. And I looked at the look in his face. I went, oh my God. In one of those moments of clarity that you have while still in, I said, this man is just as much a prisoner as I am. They're holding his children or something against him, and he's being forced to tell these lies.
Yep.
And then years later, when he got out, and I saw when live his interview with John Sweeney when it was going up, and I cried. I wept with joy because it was like, oh my God. But I had also at that time I was getting in touch with, I left my job at the nursing home because I couldn't deal with that anymore. It was breaking my heart to take care of people while they were dying of the most horrible disease possible and losing themselves through Alzheimer's, through multi-infarct dementia, through all sorts of progressive dementia. And I was good. I could hold a whole room of 40 people in sway, 40 people sundowning, saying they have to go home now. Oh, but we must sing this one more song. Let me call you sweetheart. And I would be able to keep them, but it broke me. And so I went to work at a bank, and I could not do the bank, and I quit the bank because it was just too much. And Wally said, look, you've got this CD sitting there in the bank. It's worth a couple $1,000. Why don't you take a couple months off and figure out where you are? You haven't properly processed the morning of leaving the nursing home. So I sat on the back porch and I was doing my tarot deck. I was redoing my tarot deck on Photoshop. I can even put a link to it. It's beautiful art, even though I don't believe in it anymore.
It is, yeah.
And I thought I need something to listen to while I'm doing this intricate work. And so I happened on Tori Christman's Escape Story, which was then cut into 10 parts, and I was listening to it.
Mm.
Now, I still believed, so I prayed. I said, let me be able to earn my loaf of bread and my cup of wine by helping people out of this sort of stuff.
Mm.
And I reached out to Tori, and she introduced me to Pete Griffiths, and I did a piece of work for him, which was the hardest piece of art I've ever done, with the names of some 700 people. I'd forget but it was like hundreds of names of people
Lots
whose
of names.
lives had been arguably shortened through Scientology. From Quentin, who killed himself, to Karen de la Carrier's son, to various other people who, if it were not for being in Scientology, they would have either gotten the medical help or not have died in mysterious circumstances,
Or
or
not committed suicide, like
committed
Stephen Crane and
suicide,
Lee Johnson and Quentin Hubbard.
and
Yeah.
all of them. And it was a
James.
very hard thing. And it was sent on to the 2015 conference on Scientology in Dublin, where there was this guy speaking about his idea that it's not just Scientology, it's all sorts of authoritarian groups. And I went, I want to work for that man. And I said, Pete, can you get me in contact with this guy? I want to work for him. He said, well, he's actually looking for an assistant. And that guy was...
I have no idea.
And that's how we met, John.
Yep, that's right. Though, in fact, the first time I saw you was a video you made for Andrea Garner, wishing her a happy birthday while playing on an out-of-tune piano.
Yes, I still have that out-of-tune piano. I'm looking straight at it.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get it tuned one day. Yeah,
Yes.
and here we are, what, 8 years later?
8 years later. And what a wild, like I said, what a wild, and I want to say to everybody, once again, I'm fine. Yes, the emotion that you saw was real, but I'm fine. My day-to-day life is very, very easy. I do work for John. I do work for Steve Hassan. I do work for a couple other folks. And I have a few streams of income. Our Patreon helps. And I live a very nice life in a very nice house with a husband who loves me and takes care of me. I've got a good boss and friend here. I mean, you are amazing, John. It's always an honor. And I have, I don't know if I believe in prayer anymore, but I do believe that there is something bigger than us, but I refuse to quantify it.
It's an elephant.
It's
bigger than us, what can I say?
I keep my beliefs very, very, very nebulous now. I really
Agnosis, it's a very good thing. It's a very safe place to be, because you
Yeah.
don't have to be fervent about it. You don't have
No,
to
and I can
bash
say,
people over the head with it.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I presume I'll find out, and maybe I never will. And the birds agree.
Yeah.
But I also, I don't need to know, but I know that I am doing what I wanted to do. I have helped people privately. People email me all the time. One guy was convinced that Scientology was infecting his brainwaves, and I actually talked him down off of that, and he's now seeing a therapist. Because I am not a licensed therapist, but I will say, get help and be a friendly ear. I have been there for ex-JWs who phone me, is Jehovah going to destroy me? No, honey. Jehovah's not going to destroy you. You're fine. I have written endless articles, edited all your videos, and helped. And that to me is probably the best life that I could probably live. the best thing that I could do with my life is to make at least somebody else's life, take them away from authoritarianism, at least make them think about what
Yeah,
they're
and
doing.
I'm putting that message into the world that human society has largely been authoritarian, and it
Mhm.
largely still is authoritarian. It hasn't always been. Um,
And I don't think we have to be. I was having this discussion with my husband last night. He was like, I don't know if we'll ever get out of authoritarianism. It seems to me that we're just wired that way. I was like, no, we're not.
no, the Mohenjo-daro, the Indus Valley civilization, 700 years without war. In the
That's what I
Ukraine,
brought up to him last night.
there was another one, but definitely get him to read Grover and Wengro,
Mhm.
The Dawn of Everything, because you see that the idea we're being given, and there are a number of pundits who are giving this idea. Yuval Harari is very popular. Jared Diamond, and it's not to criticize all of their work. It's just that they seem to have this idea that there's a kind of inevitable evolutionary progress that ends up with patrician capitalism
Yeah,
and Elon Musk. And it isn't so. There are all sorts of different societies have existed. And the fact that brutalism has triumphed doesn't mean that we can't grow up, doesn't mean that we
exactly.
can't have a somewhat more adult attitude towards our fellow human beings. So who knows? But I think it's possible. Um, and I think if we don't, then the human race is going to be a great deal smaller in 100 or 200 years' time. So
And then
it's
maybe we can
worth
start
doing.
again with that. Or
Well,
somebody
maybe
else can
they can
start
start
again.
again with that. I'm not coming back. I'm done with it, you know. Grand. Okay, well, I think we've told a story. And
Yeah, hopefully a coherent one.
yeah, it seemed relatively coherent. You'll find out when you edit it, no doubt.
Yeah,
And it seemed time to explain what it was that brought you here, and why you do as much as you do, which is a tremendous amount to make sure that this material is there. So
it's become a calling. Even
yeah,
though I'm not sure who's calling, it's still a calling.
yeah. I am hoping to get back to my calling one day from doing all of this stuff, which just seemed to be necessary,
Yes.
because there aren't enough of us doing it,
No.
um, which is shocking, you know, given that there are hundreds of thousands of academics in this world who could be doing something about this, and instead of studying the fluff in their navels, you know,
I
or
think
teaching mindfulness, you know.
I think there is hope, and I do think that the next few generations will look a little bit more seriously at it.
I think that, you know, the message is there, and there are a few of us who are persistently putting it forward, and I think it is definitely gaining traction.
Mhm,
Um, so, you know, and serious organizations are looking at changing the way they behave,
mhm.
um, which is
Well,
great.
your friend Ira Chalip's work
Hmm.
gives me a lot of hope, and the fact that he's done a lot of good work in the militaries of both of our countries.
Yeah, and various corporations, and his book Intelligent Disobedience is available in China and Russia. Who knows what it
Mhm,
actually says in those languages? But yeah, he's done something truly important with his life,
mhm.
and
And his
hopefully will.
Think, Blink, Choice voice, which I wrote a song for, by the way.
Yeah,
And
all
even
good,
that's just
all good
but
things.
yeah, that if that even keeps one kid from getting abused or
Hmm,
hitting somebody because their volleyball coach told them to.
hmm. I think, you know, we are living in. I think part of the change in our culture is a change in the amount of violence in our culture, that it was considered normal to beat children to get them an education, and I think that's really stupid, knowing what we know about trauma
Mhm,
now. It's not a good way to make people better, and we have found that kindness is a better way.
I do
Doesn't
think
mean we shouldn't lock up serial killers. Of course we should, but
well, one of the things that Wally and I have been doing is we have been watching old movies and old TV shows. And even in just the 30 or 40 years between now and those TV shows, or 50, 60 years, we were watching Happy Days. And to see how far we have come. We
since
have
Henry Winkler, yeah.
we have come to the point where it's no longer okay to say that it's cool for a guy to snap his fingers and the girl just sits down on his lap and she's just this object for him. It's no longer okay for the guy who can punch somebody the hardest is the one who's right in any argument. We're learning this and we're learning it slowly. And I think we are going to learn it.
Yeah, the situation is a lot better now than it was
Indeed.
in the 1950s and it was in the 1920s, going back through history. We're at least questioning the way that our society functions, and hopefully all the children at home will be questioning that deeply now, and
or
sticking a
even
few bucks in the Patreon account for us.
Patreon thing, or that now, gay people no longer hide. We were watching the history of how the birdcage was made
Mm.
and what horrible resistance it had because God forbid they were showing a gay married couple in a positive light.
La
And then
cage aux folles.
yes. And then we watched the movie, and although Nathan Lane is wonderful, I turned to Wally and said, no gay man I know acts like that.
No, well, I don't think anybody acts like Nathan Lane, but having watched some gay pride parades, people can
Yeah.
get a little bit effusive, but
Yeah.
yeah,
But at the same time, we have now gotten to the point where at least they don't need to hide in the shadows. And we know gay people exist. Who'da thunk? And
Alexander the
trans
Great.
people exist. And who'da thunk?
Yeah, Alexander the Great and Leonardo da Vinci among the gay people who have existed.
Exactly.
But
And there was actually a Roman emperor who wanted to be referred to as she, and was
the Roman emperors are not a very good example of
no,
anything,
they're not of
usually.
anything. No, but we're getting off the subject like we always
Way
do,
off,
John. We
way off
always
subject.
do.
Okay, so thank you very much, Spike, for sharing
Thank
your
you.
history with us.
Thank
And
you for listening. And no, I'm
thank you
insane.
for listening. I write just for you.
I know it sounded insane, but this is what can happen. It really is.
Yeah, there are thousands and thousands of groups out there, ranging from just partnerships where spousal abuse is happening, coercive control, through to China, North Korea, places where the control is just absolutely unbelievable. And hopefully things will get better and the world will be a lovely place. And vanilla won't be a nasty term anymore. Vanilla will be lovely and we'll all be happy. And thank you very much for spending time with us. See you again soon. Cheer, bye. Hi, John here. Thanks for watching. We'd appreciate it very much if you would click like, as well as subscribe, and click the bell for notifications. Every dollar helps, and we welcome new patrons on Patreon, or you can make a one-off payment with any currency through PayPal. Thanks so much.